Hi, and welcome to the Global Health Beat, where we explore trends, nuances, and opportunities for HCP engagement in international markets. I'm Amanda Prito, and I'm pleased to introduce my colleague and co host, Matt Durham, Vice President of Global Engagement Strategy here at CMI Media Group. And today, our special guest, Fanny Verstappen, Sales Manager with Medscape, and pharmaceutical media expert, Yaneti Hira. We're looking forward to bringing you this conversation about HCP engagement in France. So let's get right into it. Hi, Yaneti. Hi, Fanny. Thank you so much for being here with us.
Hi.
We're going to get started with our conversation today, and let's begin with Yaneti if we can. So, how would you describe pharma marketing and what is unique about this topic in France?
I would say that the French market is quite specific because several things come together at the same time. First, the regulatory framework is very strict. Authorities such as ANSM set clear regulations so that any promotional communication stays in line with French marketing authorization and public health goals. And also, many materials need to be approved before use. This means you have to think ahead from the beginning, so define your strategy, your main messages, and your activities early, while keeping some flexibility to react to what happens in the market. The second point is French HCPs face real information overload. They receive many messages from different stakeholders and channels, and their behavior is increasingly hybrid. Digital has clearly grown, especially among younger doctors, but many still rely on trusted specific media and print journals in depth reading education.
Yes, I think that this is really the case, what we expect and what we experiment also. And what is a little bit more unique about the marketing in France that is that, as we just discussed, it's a landscape where the regulatory environment is very strict. And there is a clear separation also between the education and the promotion. And so the transferee rules and compliance requirements influence, in fact, both the content and the way the messages will be shared. So as a result of this, the successful communication is less about the products, but it's more about the education. And so it has to be a focus on disease awareness or public health or helping doctors to make a better clinical decision.
All excellent points. Matt, let's move over to you. So, can you please describe the current landscape and lean into the Media Vitals insights that you have seen recently from new research from CMI in terms of media consumption habits?
Yeah, absolutely. So I don't know if we've spoken about this before, but every year we publish proprietary data on like media habits, channel preferences for HCPs in different markets. It's called Media Vitals Global. And it's looking at different, like 10 to 12 different specialties and across all of the EU5 markets and some other markets, France being the key one. And we're in our third year of running this data, so really building up a decent sense in what trends are happening, what's different in the different markets. And when we look at France, something that we increasingly see is we take a step back and look at some of the other markets. We've had these conversations about the UK, Spain, Canada, for example, which kind of increasingly see almost like this homogenization of like the media habits and the different platforms that we know we can reach HCPs from a media perspective in. The global platforms that we know the Medscape's the key ones. The something that we see in France increasingly is while that trend is happening, we know we can reach an ever-growing number of HCPs on like a Medscape, for example. We're also still seeing, or continuing to see, I should say, this real importance in like the local platforms, the local media as well, especially like the primary care audiences, where we're trying to reach those. There's so many great times and platforms in market that we can also use that it seems everly increasingly important. And that's the key thing we're seeing this trend continue that we're not really seeing in other markets and still really seeing that more move to like global platforms. And what is happening in France, there's still that undercurrent of like key French platforms and British language content that we always going to have to build into all of our campaigns that we're running in France.
Awesome. So, Fanny, let's go back to you. So, your expertise crosses over many regions, and I think we'd like to hear about in terms of comparison and contrast to neighboring countries like Belgium and the Netherlands.
Yes, with pleasure. First, one important point about France is that it has a stricter regulatory environment with stronger rules around pharmaceutical communication. So, of course, this creates less flexibility compared to, for example, Belgium or the Netherlands. So, in France, what we see is that the HCP really value credibility and editorial independence. So, they are quite selective in how they engage with the media. And so there are some similarities, of course, with Belgium. So in both countries, the HCPs tend to prefer third-party platforms to stay up to date with scientific information. But to be honest, we see that it's even more pronounced in France, where there is a strong cultural preference for content that is well structured, validated, and aligned with the clinical practices.
Well, to make this doable in France, you have to use data to be much more precise about who you talk to, what and how you combine the different channels. In a market where HCPs are overloaded and less tolerant with generic campaigns, data is what allows us to segment and adapt the content as well as respect their time. So digital, including social and other online touchpoints, gives us the data we need to better segment HCPs.
And from our survey we did last year to the French HCPs, is that around 60% of the HCP engagement is expected to happen by independent channels. So it's really important also to take that in account in the marketing plans. This creates a strong opportunity for content that is, in fact, really truly educational, evidence-based, and relevant for HCPs.
So funny, some of you were saying that there was really interesting to me is about how like information is coming from everywhere, but especially with French HCPs. And I don't obviously more than a year now, but relatively recently, Medscape launched Medscape Extend in Europe, which has really had such a huge impact on how we plan media and how we can reach HCPs. And for the first time, we can now really reach verified HCPs, not just on like endemic closed platforms, but wherever they go on the internet. So I'm really curious about how you've seen HCPs in France kind of reacting and engaging, responding to Medscape Extend, starting to see messaging for pharma in places where historically they've never seen.
We launched this recently, and of course we see the difference because at the end we come up in the customer journey in another moment than where they always be contacted by all this information. And so Extend let us to give us the possibility to reach the customer within his journey at the right moment with the right message. And we don't have to forget that the HCPs are, of course, doctors, but also humans. So they also go to a website to read information that is not directly linked to medical information. They also want to book a plane. They also want to search from a nice cooking recipe. And so it's really important to be able to give a solution to be there in the complete customer journey of the HCPs. And so I think that the product was really appreciated by the HCP, especially had an example to share. An HCP explained to us that it was really interesting because he saw a banner with some video content, a content that is more time consuming or longer than just seeing a message and going to something else. And so he was looking for something else and then showing that message, but it's a topic that is really interesting for him. And so he clicks, and at that moment, in fact, he had the time to look at the video, and he saw the video on another campaign before on Medscape, and there it was in a moment where he had not the time to look at the video, but he was interested. So he has a reminder of the campaign, and at a moment that was better for him at that time. And so at the end, the content was consumed.
All right, excellent. So as we wrap, Yannetti, can you share with us what might surprise someone who is outside of the France region about pharma marketing?
Of course, what could be surprising for someone not familiar with France is how strict and organized the environment is. Promotion is closely controlled by health authorities, and doctors are very selective about the information and interactions they accept. Another point is that the market is not all digital. Digital tools are now part of everyday practice, but many HCPs still use trusted professional media and more traditional formats for in-depth content
Yes, well, I agree with that. And I would add that next to the really requirements and rules of France, we could also be surprised on how independent and sometimes really skeptical French HCPs can be towards pharmaceutical messaging. So, in fact, I think that something that can be also really surprising is that the influence is not built like quickly in that country. It takes time. So it comes from consistency and credibility when the content is relevant. And so once that the HCP, as I also explained, is really facing a trust source and he trusts and give credibility to that, he will come back and he will engage a lot. And so maybe a final word is that France may look some conservative from the outside, but they are actually really open to innovation. The only thing is that the innovation has to be scientifically strong and fits with the local medical culture.
What a fantastic conversation. So very rewarding to engage with HCPs in the French region, but you have to earn it, is what I'm hearing. So I love these themes that we touched on today: regulatory standards, cultural expectations, and ways to manage the channels to really break through to healthcare professionals in your region. Thank you so much to all of you for this conversation today and to you for joining us on the Global Health Beat. Remember to like and subscribe.